Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we're going to be talking about which healers need some significant changes, hopefully coming into season 4, which is the next season, or possibly even the next expansion, the War Within. I'm not going to be talking about every single healer. I'll talk about the healers that are kind of in a dire need of changes. I'll talk about the positives and negatives. We'll talk about some of the season 4 voted tier sets, whether they're good or bad. But let's go and get started. We're going to start with the healer that I feel needs quite a few changes, and that is going to be Holy Paladin. So where do we start here? Holy Paladin, it went through a roller coaster of emotions, honestly, in Dragonflight. I think in season 3 right now, it's probably, I don't want to say it's in the worst state, because there is a lot of Holy Paladins doing Mythic Raid content, or you can push high Mythic plus keys as Holy Paladin, but in my opinion, as someone who actually mains Holy Paladin, who played Holy Paladin in raids because the guild wanted Holy Paladin, and the guild achieved Hall of Fame, I didn't really enjoy playing Holy Paladin, but I also felt, or I could see why the guild asked me to play this healer, because it still provides a lot of that utility when it comes to raiding. So why did I not enjoy playing Holy Paladin? What could be improved? I think for a lot of people out there, for anyone who's playing this class, they're probably fully aware of some of the issues because everyone keeps talking about this. I think one of the most blatant issues right now with Holy Paladin is to do with Holy Power Spenders. Holy Power Spenders feel really weak, they don't move bars, and a lot of Holy Paladins don't even track Holy Power right now. They're just tracking Blessing of Dawn buffs or stacks in order when to use your Holy Power Spenders like Word of Glory of Light of Dawn. It's a little bit weird to have a class that relies on Holy Power, but at the same time, it doesn't really care about the Holy Power Spenders. It's like playing a rogue and not caring about your combat points. Blizzard would look at that straight away and they would try and fix it. This is why it felt like such a blatant issue when playing Holy Paladin. The fact that your Holy Power Spenders don't feel good to spend feels like a pretty big oversight for a class that has Holy Power. A lot of the other issues with Holy Paladin are to do, or a lot more subjective, my personal opinions. I don't really like the fact that Holy Paladin moved a lot more into that hard casting gameplay. For example, Holy Paladin for a really long time, it is a melee healer, and for a long time you basically relied on just casting your instant cast abilities. You didn't really have to cast Flashlight or anything like that in order to keep your party alive, and you could just, you know, melee healer, instant cast abilities felt really smooth and fluid. And then you moved into season 3 and there were a lot of mana issues. There was a lot of talents that buffed your kind of hard casting, and especially in something like raid environment, if you're running Beacon of Virtue, you have mana issues, you will have to spend or cast Flash of Light in order to keep your mana healthy, and because Flash of Light is buffed by multiple different things. But I don't want to digress too much. I do think that the Holy Power Spender is an issue. I think that could be fixed very easily, but the fact that Blizzard hasn't looked at that yet is just baffling to me. Hopefully in season 4. The fact that, again, a more personal opinion about the hard casting, I'm not sure if that's going to be fixed in season 4, because we'll have to see. And on top of that, mana issues, we'll talk about that. There's going to be a chapters in the video. I'll talk about this at the end of the video in terms of the grand scheme of what could or should change in terms of healers coming into the next patch, coming into the next expansion. And in season 4, you're actually able to vote for whichever tier set you want to come back. And I think most people, you can see they voted for season 2 tier set. And it kind of makes sense, because I think a lot of people want to go back to, they want to go back to the spot healing heyday in season 2. Holy Paladin in season 2 was arguably the only one healer when it comes to Mythic Plus content that provided so much spot healing capabilities, and Mythic Plus in season 2 was very, very unforgiving. So Holy Paladin was the one and only king when it came to Mythic Plus pushing, and then it got nerfed like 25,000 times. A lot of other healers got buffed in terms of single target healing, and it no longer has that monopoly. I think a lot of people, for example here, Holy Shocks, critical strikes heal for 60% more, or more power in terms of your Holy Shocks. Holy Shock is your bread and butter ability, but not for its healing. A lot of your toolkit revolves around the fact that you press Holy Shock, that applies Glimmer of Light, and that it also works with your 2-set bonus in terms of Holy Reverberation. And you basically playing or pressing Holy Shock because of the other interactions outside of its healing. I personally would like Holy Paladin to go back to the previous gameplay that we had in something like season 2 or something along those lines. I know in season 2 the power of Holy Paladin was absolutely insane, that it needed to be nerfed by a significant margin, but the gameplay, I liked it. I liked the instant cast gameplay. You didn't really have to hard cast all that much. I do think that you still need more power and emphasis on Holy Power Spenders to make them feel more impactful in that toolkit that Holy Paladin has, because if you have a class that revolves around Holy Power generation, Holy Power Spenders should actually mean something. So there's a lot of changes that could or should happen to Holy Paladin in season 4, possibly the War Within, Let me know how you feel about Holy Paladin. If you're playing Holy Paladin, how do you like this class in Mythic Plus? How do you like it in Raid? Again, what are the positives and negatives for you? Let's move on to the next healer. Let's go and talk about Restoration Druid a little bit. Now, there is a lot of different opinions about Resto Druid, because Resto Druid right now in Season 3 is doing really well in Mythic Plus content, and in raids, it's really... Again, in high-end Mythic raiding, you're not really going to be like, oh hey, we really need a Resto Druid to bypass this boss because they're really great. The only, or the main reason to bring a Resto Druid in raid is because you're missing Market Wild. But the big talking point here is going to be Grove Guardians. Love it or hate it, there's been a lot of talk about Grove Guardians and Resto Druid becoming a pet healing class. So Grove Guardians is going to make up a significant portion of your overall healing when it comes to Mythic Plus content. My personal opinion about Grove Guardians is that I kind of like Grove Guardians in Mythic Plus content because it allows me to do damage. I really like Feral, I really like Kitty Weaving. The fact that Restoration Druid, it's not a healer that does healing through damage. So in order for me to min-max my damage when it comes to Mythic Plus content, I need to go into Kitty form, apply my bleeds and things like that, and I need to make sure that someone else is healing the party. And Grove Guardians fit this niche really well with the new tier sets and things like that. I'm really enjoying it. I do see the other side of Grove Guardians. When it goes to raiding content, and I've been doing a lot of mythic raiding, I've been trying to raid with my Resto Druid more, and I see the big problems that Resto Druid has. Grove Guardians has huge impact in Mythic Plus content because it allows you to DPS more. In raiding content, the lack of Grove Guardian interaction with the rest of your toolkit is extremely evident. It doesn't feel like a crazy impactful button that you press. It just feels like a chore that you press once in a while, depending on the damage patterns and things like that. So Grove Guardians in Mythic Plus, for me, feels nice. Grove Guardians in raiding content, there needs to be more interaction with the rest of your toolkit, and I think that's very evident in the War Within talents that we kind of seen. Again, I might make a video about this later on, but Blizzard is trying to fix the interaction with the rest of your toolkit. Other problems. Resto Druid in Mythic Plus, I think it's in a very decent position. I think the class tree for Resto Druid is really cringe. I think talents like Ironfur, the fact that you have to pick it because you have to go down the tree. I think there is so many problems in terms of if you're trying to pick an interrupt and trying to pick other utility items, you can't really do that. There's a couple of nodes at the end of the tree that you need to pick up because of the throughput. The class tree for Druid needs major rework. I'm not sure if that's going to happen in Season 4. We'll have to see. Hopefully that's going to happen in the next expansion. But we still have to talk about Resto Druid in raids, because I'm really enjoying Resto Druid in Mythic Plus content. It allows me to do more damage, Grove Guardian interaction, the tier set, clear casting goats feel really impactful because you're getting a lot of procs. In raiding content, they over-nerf Flourish a lot. Mana can still be an issue. They nerf things like abundance interaction. There's a lot of things that feel different when playing Resto Druid in raid, and I don't think it feels as fun or impactful. There is a lot of things that could be changed for Resto Druid in raiding content. I'm not sure if Blizzard is going to do that, but if they don't do anything about Resto Druid in raids, it's going to be one of those healers where you, for example, in my case, I'm only raiding with Resto Druid in order to get gear in order to push Mythic Plus content, because Resto Druid feels more impactful and fun to play in that 5-man organized group. And now let's talk about Mistweaver Monk, and honestly this section is going to be very short, because if you're a Mistweaver Monk, you're enjoying your time in Season 3. In the grand scheme of things, if you look at Mythic Plus content, if you look at Mythic raiding, arguably the best healer right now is Mistweaver Monk. For example, in Mythic raiding, it's almost mandatory, especially on certain fights like Mythic Frack, where you need to heal the 3 adds. In Mythic Plus content, Mistweaver Monk has done some of the highest keys in the world, and honestly, the gameplay with Ancient Teachings and Jadefire Stomp feels really fun if you like that melee healer. But in terms of some of the quality of life, we talked about this. In Mythic Plus, you're playing that Jadefire Stomp, you're playing that Ancient Teachings, and I would like some kind of like melee range increase, because so much of your healing is going to come from the fact that you're dealing damage, and that damage is going to be converted into heals through multiple of your talents. And I think that's really fun. But if you can't be in melee range of a boss or a trash bag because you have a mechanic or something along those lines, it can feel really painful. And some of the hitboxes for certain bosses can be really cringe as well. So just increasing the melee range would be such a big quality of life improvement without making them overpowered. It would just make the class feel more fun. I've been saying this for a really long time. Almost every single video that I made in season 3 for Mistweaver Monk, I'm just still waiting for these changes. And on top of that, this is going to be a bit more personal, but Essence font. So at the start of Season 3, Essence Font actually played a part in terms of your toolkit. You actually would use Essence Font, and then Blizzard ended up nerfing a lot of the talents and interaction with Essence Font and made that ability a lot less relevant. To an extent that we kind of went back to the point where you don't really press Essence Font depending on which build you're running. I would still like to press Essence Font. I kind of like that ability depending on the situation, depending on the damage that it's coming. Again, this is a very, very personal, very subjective opinion. A lot of people might not care about this. I don't think it's a huge deal, but the fact that Essence Font is not really a big part of your toolkit anymore, again, I would like that to come back. I would like that to be incorporated maybe in different ways, but overall, Mistweaver Monk is in a really, really good position. I think if you're playing Mistweaver, you're having a really fun time. And now let's go back to my boy Restoration Shaman. Honestly, a healer that I always kind of come back to because I just really like the gameplay. I like the fact that the utility, the buttons that you can press in Mythic Plus, especially in those weekly keys, the carry potential is really there. What should change for Restoration Shaman going forward? A lot of people have been talking about a possible rework, some major changes. That's not going to happen in like Season 4, let's be honest. Blizzard is not going to do a whole lot of things in Season 4 because I think a lot of developers are working on the War Within, which is the next expansion. So I don't think there's going to be some groundbreaking changes the Shaman is going to receive. I think that Shaman or Resto Shaman in general needs to have a raid buff. For example, if you're playing Enhancement Shaman, you have Windfury Totem. But if you play something like Restoration Shaman or Elemental Shaman, you don't really have an equivalent of that. You do have something like in PvP, like the Sky Fury Totem. Maybe they could have something similar for this spec, because right now the difference between getting invited in Mythic Plus content, a lot of that is to do with what kind of buffs can you bring. If you're playing Restoration Druid or Druid in general, you bring Mark of the Wild. If you're playing Priest, you bring Fortitude. A lot of people tend to kind of not talk about Restoration Shaman's Ancestral Vigor because that can be really, really nice in terms of doing some high tyrannical keys and the group needs to survive a one-shot. I think that can be something that Resto Shamans can bring, but outside of that, Shamans specifically need to have a raid buff in order to try to compete with some of the other classes who bring good healing, good damage, decent utility, but they also have a raid buff. So we'll have to see if Blizzard is going to incorporate something like that in Season 4. It's probably most likely going to be added in the next expansion. I say like I know things. I don't know if they're going to add that, but I'm really, really hoping because a lot of people have been talking about this. And in terms of the tier sets, in Season 4, people voted for Season 1 tier set, and this is absolutely hilarious because this is the most bland and passive tier set. And most of the people would rather have this and have a normal gameplay the Resto Shaman provides versus using other tier sets that would significantly impact your gameplay, because a lot of people found those impacts to gameplay to be pretty negative. Now, don't get me wrong, in my opinion, I think Season 2 tier set, after it got buffed, after it got changed, was actually pretty fun depending on which content you're doing, but I can see why most people would vote for Season 1, because they don't like the direction the developers are bringing Resto Shaman in terms of the tier set design. They rather would play Resto Shaman the way that it's supposed to be played, have something like this, which is extremely bland and passive, and just have a good time. So I can see why people chose this. This is an indication to Blizzard developer team or whoever is in charge of designing tier sets to Resto Shaman that, hey, please, spend a little bit more time. So in the grand scheme of things, I would like Resto Shaman or Shamans in general to receive a raid buff. I'm not sure if that's going to happen in Season 4. I'm not sure if that's going to happen in the next expansion, but the fact that you could have an equivalent of something like Enhancement Shaman's Windfury Totem for Resto Shaman or something like Elemental Shaman is something that could be really fun. The fact that Blizzard is also doubling down on something like Power Infusion in the War Within for priests means that Blizzard is willing to try and balance these party buffs. So we'll see. I'm hopeful. I'm enjoying my Restoration Shaman. I think it's a fun healer. I'm going to like Resto Shaman in Season 4, even though that, again, you're getting a very passive tier set bonus. You're just going to be able to play Shaman the way that you want instead of being forced or have to play around the tier set. And I think that's actually a good thing. And now let's go talk about Preservation of Evoker. And honestly, this is a little bit sad for me because Preservation has been my main for this expansion. I played Preservation in Season 1, I played it in Season 2, and only in Season 3 I had to swap away to play Holy Paladin. And that is mainly because my guild asked me to play Holy Paladin in raid situations. So Evoker has been a healer that I played a lot. I enjoyed this healer, and I think in Season 3 a lot of people downplayed the potential of Preservation of Evoker, especially when it comes to that Mythic Plus content, because you have Augmentation. Augmentation is kind of, how do I say, destroyed the viability of preservation, it destroyed the viability of devastation to some extent. Now, preservation evoker, when you're doing, for example, mythic plus keys in season 3, the output in terms of damage, HPS, is really, really good. I think a lot of people are not even aware of that fact. I think you can have a really fun time, you can really carry keys, your utility is good. Again, in really high keys, you might have augmentation, so you don't really need the utility of preservation because they're going to be basically overlapping. I also think the very recent changes to reversion have been pretty good. It's now a bigger part of your toolkit, and I think it makes the gameplay a little more interesting. So I've been enjoying my preservation evoker a lot. I think in season 3, the output you can do is really nice. I'm mainly talking about Mythic Plus content. I haven't really played preservation too much in raids. So again, let me know if you're playing preservation. That's one of the things. The amount of people that are playing preservation right now has decreased significantly from season 1 to season 3. So this is, how do I put this? Preservation is arguably the least played healer in all forms of content, and there's multiple reasons for it. Augmentation, evoker, and range. You can do a lot of raiding, you can do a lot of Mythic Plus content, and you can have really good runs. You can do 10 Mythic Plus dungeons and carry 9 of those dungeons because your output is strong, your damage, HPS, utility, everything is really, really nice. And then the last dungeon, where people are spread, you have a ranged, or they're not really stacking, they're not really following your instructions, or bosses just promote kind of spreading, you're going to have a really, really hard time because you have range limitations versus other healers. And that's what the issue kind of stems from. You could have 90% of your runs could be really nice because everyone's stacking, everyone's following your orders, and then you could have one run that is absolutely disastrous and you really have to play around the range limitations. You can play around the range limitations. You can apply, for example, echoes on people when they're within your range. When they go out of your range, you can detonate that echo multiple different ways. So you can do that, but that requires you to kind of know when you need to do that. It kind of requires additional effort from you. I think it's time to increase the range to the 40 yards, again, depending on which abilities. I think it's time to remove this range limitation because you have to think about this. Why would I play Preservation Evoker right now, both in raids or Mythic Plus content, when I could play other healers who do similar HPS or similar damage, but they don't have to play around that range? In Season 1, it kind of worked out because Preservation Evoker output was absolutely insane. Your healing was really, really strong. You didn't really care about the range because you could just brute force the HPS requirements because your healing was really strong. In the other seasons, your healing is more comparable to other healers, but you still have that range limitation. So what is the point of Evoker or Preservation Evoker on top of the fact that you have augmentation? So all of these things kind of combined to create an effect where most of the Preservation Evokers are not playing this class anymore. And I think Blizzard needs to kind of bring back those players, and I think the range limitations, removing those range limitations is probably it's a very big step that will help this spec in a long run, and I think it would actually bring a lot of people back. Now let's go and talk about priests, and I'm going to be covering Discipline Priests and Holy Priests under the same kind of umbrella because a lot of the things that I'll be talking about in terms of the things that I would like to change are to do with something like class trees and things like that, the utility. So for example, Holy Priest right now is a type of healer that is kind of like point and click type of thing. It's somewhat simplistic. It kind of has like the classic healing at heart, and I think that's a really good thing because a lot of people really enjoy that. A lot of people don't really want the over convoluted, I'm going to deal damage and heal through that damage type of thing. They want click and heal, and I think Holy Priest fits that niche really, really well. Discipline Priest in Season 3 has changed a lot. It's received a rework. The gameplays, again, the cooldown reduction gameplay around Mindbender, Shadow Fiend, I think a lot of people, I think it would be viewed as something that was a success. Let me know, guys. I don't really main a Discipline Priest all that much. I do Discipline Priest raids and Mythic Plus, but I don't really play in the really high level. Do you like Discipline Priest? Do you like the cooldown reduction gameplay that it kind of provides right now in Season 3? Would you change anything about this? If you look at the highest content in the world, Discipline Priest is a type of healer that you will include in the highest keys in Mythic Plus in an organized content. If you're doing a pug as a Discipline Priest, I don't think it's the best pug friendly healer out there. Do you like that kind of mentality when it comes to priest healing. So what do I want priest to have in season 4 or the next expansion? And before we talk about that, we kind of have to talk about the mentality of priests. Priests have PI or power infusion, and because of that, Blizzard has actually mentioned this in blue posts and things like that. Because you have PI, you might suffer in terms of other utility items. You used to have Shining Force, that's no longer there because you have PI. Priest is the only healer that does not have an interrupt, and then again, you could argue that you're paying a price, or how do I say, PI tax, because you have power infusion. Is that good design or bad design? This is something that I really want to know your opinion about this. All of the other healers can have an interrupt. Maybe Resto Druid will have a harder time picking up interrupt, because if you pick interrupt, you might be losing some utility or some survivability. So that's one of the reasons why I say that the class tree for Druid needs to change. But the argument still stands. Every single healer can pick up interrupt, and again, priest does not have an interrupt. You're paying that utility tax because of power infusion, but maybe that's not all that bad, because not every single healer should have the same kind of utility. Maybe it's good that you have a healer that has these external buffs but does not provide a lot of other things that other healers can provide. Maybe that changes up the gameplay or meta a little bit if the balancing is done properly. And guys, I really want to know your opinion about this, because in the next expansion, Blizzard is just doubling or tripling down on power infusion. Priests are going to have these external buffs. We'll have to see how that's going to be balanced, but I'm assuming that if priests are going to have these external buffs that they can provide, that they cannot have the same utility items that the rest of the healers. So do you like the design choice of priest being or paying that PI or power infusion tax? Do you like that class design, or do you want priest to have the same utility as other healers and maybe PI being kind of toned down? Again, if you're doing weekly keys as a priest, especially someone like a discipline priest, I would change power infusion for an interrupt, an extra utility, but that is because I want to carry those keys in that weekly range. But if you're someone who's doing really high keys, for example, you like that PI, you want to have that PI, you can optimize it. If you're playing with a prod paladin, you don't need the healer to have an interrupt anyways. So let me know how you feel about this, because this is the one healer that I feel I don't really have a clear grasp in terms of what changes I would like to see. I'm just pointing out the fact that priest is paying that utility tax, and is that something that's good for the game? Is PI or power infusion good for the game? Because in perfect world, the PI I feel is a pretty nifty ability that you can really use, but we don't live in a perfect world. A lot of times power infusion causes more arguments in raids. It causes a lot of issues in terms of balancing, in terms of certain expansions or patches. You saw priests being invited to keys or mythic plus or even raids because they provide power infusion, and that is really hard to balance. Big discussion here. Let me know what you think. So now let's go to the general section of the video, and I think these points that I'm going to make are going to be applicable for a lot of healers out there, and something that I would like to happen in season 4 on the next expansion. And the first thing is going to be mana consumption. Now in season 3, Blizzard decided, and they were saying, hey, mana is going to be a resource. You're going to have to pay attention in terms of which buttons you're pressing, especially your inefficient buttons. You really have to pay or play carefully in order to avoid going And a lot of people have split opinions about this, because a lot of people might say that mana consumption or mana as a resource is an archaic feature in retail and only belongs in classic, where it plays a much bigger part. A lot of people like the mana consumption or mana restrictions because they can play more efficiently, or it makes or changes the gameplay. In a perfect world, if every single healer would have mana resource as a consideration, it would make a little bit more sense. You would have a lot less of that grass is greener type of mentality, because right now in season 3 you have certain healers who can struggle with mana in a really bad way, and then you have certain healers who don't really care at all, and that causes a lot of conflict, a lot of the balancing has not been good. And I think overall mana as a resource has been somewhat of a failure because the tuning has been really poor. I'm asking you again, I'm not sure what to do with mana as a healer coming into the next season or coming into the next expansion. I think Blizzard is somewhat incapable in terms of balancing this. So what is the best option? Because you're not going to have a perfect world where every single healer is going to have the same consideration for mana. So what is the next best opinion? And honestly, I'm waiting for your input, because I don't know if there's a clear answer here. Should mana be somewhat less restrictive in retail because of how the gameplay has evolved over times. And my next point is going to be keybinds, and this is something that I came across because I play every single healer in Season 3. I've done them in Mythic Plus, I played them in raids, and honestly, the keybinds are on a verge of being too much. And I'm talking about the amount of abilities you have on your action bars, the amount of abilities you have to keybind, the amount of abilities that you need to press in certain situations. I think we're reaching a point that if Blizzard is going to add a couple of extra actions in the next expansion or extra abilities, we're reaching a point of too much. And that is my personal opinion. For certain healers out there, honestly, my action bars are filled. I'm using an MMO mouse with a bunch of buttons on the side, and I'm running out of space. Especially if I have something like an unused weapon like Iridas, if I have unused trinkets. Not only you kind of have to use an MMO mouse because MMO mouse makes it a lot easier, but also you have to use macros where you have like help harm type of modifiers in order to, again, the keybinds for certain healers, my whole point, it's getting a little out of hand. I think we're at the point of, if we add 1 or 2 or 3 more abilities in the next expansion, it's going to become too much. But guys, let me know how you feel about this. I think Blizzard needs to be very, very, very careful about how they're going to treat new abilities, how they're going to treat existing abilities. I think certain healers could actually use pruning. I think certain healers could actually have certain abilities merged into one instead of having two different keybinds. But on the flip side, there are certain healers that have a lot of keybinds or a lot of space left over. So it really depends on which healer you're playing. But let me know how I feel about this video. This video has been extremely long. Let me know about certain healers, the changes that you would like to see in Season 4 specifically, the changes that you would like to see in something like the Warrior Within. I'm really interested in that Priest PI Power Infusion discussion because I think that's going to split a lot of opinions. Which healer needs to have the biggest rework in order to feel like a complete healer? Really interested in your opinions. I'm going to read every single comment. If you like this video, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.